Hey, Chick-fil-A Southroads team, thanks for joining me on another leadership series. Today I want to talk to you about the idea of handling guest recovery. Now, why is handling guest recovery important? It's really important because at the end of the day, we are not a perfect organization. There's times where we make mistakes. On average, 7% of guests at Chick-fil-A report having some type of issue or hiccup within their service dining with us. Now, when you think about how many guests we serve each day, that means that there's potentially about 150 guests a day which are having some type of service issue. That's 900 guests in a week. 3,600 guests in a month, and think about this, 43,200 guests in a year who might report having some type of issue or problem within our business alone. Now that is a lot of chances and opportunities that we have to make it right for our guests, even when we don't get it right the first go around. Now, when we think about even more, why is guest recovery important? Number one, it's part of our vision to have a positive influence on all who come into contact with Chick-fil-A. Well, if we don't get it right the first time, then part of our vision is to make sure that we can get it right the second time when we interact with that guest and to have a positive influence on them. One quote I love that was shared by Truett Cathy, our founder. He used to say that kindness and courtesy, they're cheap, but they pay great dividends. At the end of the day, how we treat people and how courteously we treat people is one of the most effective and one of the least costly things that we can do to make a positive impact in our guests' lives each and every day. But the second reason why it's important to have good guest recovery is because it makes business sense. Truett also said that it's easier to keep a guest than to get a new one. And when you think about the dollars that we spend to go out and market to get new guests, it is in reality a lot cheaper for us to be able to keep the current guests that we have than to go out there and spend money to try to get new guests to come into our business. As I mentioned earlier, 7% of our guests report problems on average within your Chick-fil-A. Only about 28% of guests who report problems feel that they are highly satisfied with the outcome. Okay. And when you put that over about a 3-month period, that means for those people who aren't highly satisfied, they're not coming back and they're not dining with us more often. And they say roughly it is about $50,000 in sales that we could lose every 3 months if we don't handle guest recovery the correct way. Now, the other statistic is that those who are highly satisfied with their guest recovery process, that they're also twice as likely to return in the next 30 days. So it makes great business sense. So if we know that we're going to have to recover guests, and we know that we're going to make issues as an organization and guest recovery is important, and we know that it makes a lot of great business sense and it's part of our vision to have a positive influence, then the next question we have to ask ourselves is, so how do we actually recover a guest properly and do it in a way that really makes them feel highly satisfied with the outcome? And there's really a model that we are going to utilize here at Chick-fil-A, and it's called our HEARD model, HEARD. And I want to just talk about each one of these ideas really briefly. The first part of the HEARD model is H, and it stands for hear. The first thing we want to do is we just want to make sure that we hear our guests. We want to give them our full and undivided attention when they're sharing the issues with us. There's nothing more frustrating for a guest than to be sharing what is going on and feel like the person who's standing in front of you isn't even paying attention or is focused on something else. You got to think a lot of times as a leader, when you are coming to address an issue, the reality is that you are not the first person to have already talked to this guest. Either the guest has already reached out to a team member and shared some of their frustrations and it hasn't been successfully satisfied, or maybe they've reached out to Chick-fil-A corporate and now you're responding back. But at some point, they're already sharing their frustration now for the second or third time with you. And so you need to really make sure that you are listening attentively to make sure that you understand everything that's going on. Don't be so quick just to resolve the issue, but make sure that the guest feels heard in what they're sharing with you, so then you can begin to listen and figure out what you want to do next. So you're giving them your undivided attention, you're paying attention, you're reaffirming the things that they're saying as they're sharing with you, so you understand very clearly what's going on. But the second step in the model is the E. It's the empathize. We want to really empathize with the guests. We want to really put ourselves in the guest's shoes and think about what would it feel like if that happened to us. A lot of times when we interact with guests, they are frustrated and upset, and it feels like we are just the target of their anger or their frustration. But if we take a second to think, what could this person be going from? Again, I use this analogy a lot. Are they coming from St. Francis Hospital, where maybe they've had a really bad week from a medical standpoint, or they have somebody that they know that's in the hospital? Maybe they are really stressed out because they have all their kids that they're watching over in the day, and they're trying to get all their errands done. And then as they're coming to Chick-fil-A to feed some of their kids, then we get their food wrong and inaccurate. Or could it be a speed issue? Maybe somebody's on their way to work and they're running late and behind, and they just want to grab a quick breakfast at Chick-fil-A, but because we weren't fast in providing them great service, that they are maybe late to work, or there could be some issues. So we want to make sure that we are empathizing with our guests when they're speaking to them. We want to make sure, hey, I understand that's really frustrating when this happens, or I can't imagine how difficult it must have been to, have this situation happen in those circumstances. And so we want to make sure that we truly empathize and have a genuine empathy for our guests, and maybe some of the inconveniences and frustrations that we've caused them. The third step in our herd model is A, that we want to actually apologize. I think this is one step, if we're not careful, we can easily skip over, because we may go quickly to resolving it, that we don't take a second just to apologize to the guests and let them know, hey, we are so sorry about what we did. That is not the type of service that we want to provide, and we are so sorry that happened to you, and we appreciate the feedback that you're giving us to make it better. And so we want to make sure that we take a moment to let the guests know that, hey, we are truly sorry for what has happened in your guest experience. Remember, these are people who are coming, and they are our guests because they are spending money and they are buying a product from us. And so we want to make sure that we apologize when we don't get it right. Now, once we apologize, the next thing we want to do is we do want to make sure that we resolve the issue. We want to make sure that we can do everything that we can to make sure that we resolve the actual issue. Now, a lot of times when these events happen, or when people bring incidents to us, a lot of times we're not quick to resolve them, because sometimes we even might think, well, are they scamming us? Or maybe you feel like you want to protect Chick-fil-A South Roads, or protect me as an owner operator from scams. So one statistic I'd like to share, which is really interesting, is that, when Chick-fil-A did studies, they actually said 95% of issues are truly and clearly a result of product or service failure. So 95% of the complaints that people give actually are directly related to something that went wrong in the business. It could have been a speed, accuracy, quality. It could have been some type of customer service inadequacy, but 95% of issues clearly are a result of a product or service failure. Then 4% is in that gray area. It's in that area where, we don't know if what they're saying is true or not, but to actually verify it would probably be very difficult for us to do, right? And so we got 4% of the thing is like, even if you don't believe the guest, or you feel like they might be lying or telling something different, the reality is we don't have the ability to really go and verify and check on what they're saying. And then really only about 1% of guest complaints are actual fraudulent complaints, where they are making something up that's completely false and not lying. And so when we go to resolve, I want us to lean on the side of really trusting our guests. A lot of times I'll say this idea is like, hey, fool me once, shame on you, but fool me twice, shame on me. So the reality is that, when people come, we're going to trust them and trust their opinion. And, if they fool us, then shame on them for being a type of person who would lie and cheat and steal their way through life. But the reality is if they come back again and we see them recurring over and over, then there's some things that we need to do to maybe make sure that we're building a relationship. Maybe say, hey, I've noticed that we've missed this the last couple of times with you. Are there things that we could do to really make sure that this doesn't continue to happen? I think when guests see that we pay that type of level of attention and detail to the recovery process, that they are less likely to come and try to provide some type of fraudulent activity or some type of scam with us. Now, the final step that I want to talk about is also a step that sometimes can be easily missed, and that is to delight. Now, of course, we want to recover the guest. If we missed an item or we got something wrong, we want to make sure that we get that right. But sometimes we stop there. We just stop with, okay, we got you back. So you're missing some fries. Hey, I got you some new fries. Or, hey, you're missing a sandwich from your last meal. We're going to replace that sandwich on your next visit. Well, that is great, but that really doesn't go above and beyond, because think about it. At the end of the day, they've already paid for that fry. They've already paid for that sandwich. And when they come back, getting another fry or just a sandwich by itself may not necessarily feel that great, because I've already paid for that and now I'm getting it as a separate part of a meal and I can't really enjoy it with my whole meal. And so the last step we want to do is just to make sure we delight the guests. What are we doing to go above and beyond? So if we were missing a sandwich on their meal, rather than just replacing a sandwich on their next meal, we may say, hey, we're going to replace a combo meal for you on that next visit. Or if there's some aspect of their service that didn't come out quickly, we may want to say, hey, we're going to include a cookie or 6-pack of cookies for a family, to make sure that we went above and beyond to delight the guests. So again, we definitely want to recover the guests, but we also want to make sure we delight it. And maybe delighting sometimes isn't even giving them free food. Delighting them might just be giving them your attention and giving them, letting them know that you are fully engaged and making it right and making sure that they have a better day. And so when you think again about the herd model, what are we going to do? We're going to hear, we're going to give them our full attention. We're going to empathize with our guests. We're going to really make sure we put ourselves in their shoes and understand how frustrating it could be for them to have received the type of service that maybe they had received. We want to make sure we apologize. We want to make sure that our guests know and hear that we are truly sorry for the service that we provided and that isn't the service that we were aiming for. We want to make sure that we resolve the issue, that we do everything we can to make sure that we resolve the current issue and make sure that it is that they're recovered as a guest, and by finally delighting them, making sure we go above and beyond to make sure that guest is satisfied and truly excited and highly satisfied with the way that their guest complaint was handled. Now, if we do that, not only are guests going to leave highly satisfied, but they're going to come back more and more often, because I think our guests, they know that we're not perfect. They know that no one is perfect. So I don't think guests are coming in all the time expecting us to be perfect. They just want to make sure that when we're not perfect, that we own up to our mistakes and that we really do everything we can do to make it right. So I believe if you lean into this herd model and guest recovery, that we will begin to see that guests will be more excited, they'll be more understanding, and be more willing to come back and create loyalty and create just an excitement that our guests have with dining with us. So thank you for leaning into your development here at Chick-fil-A, and thank you for leaning into being great guest recovery leaders within our business.